A lot of Iranians right now are very angry with European countries. And even though the anger and the frustration that the Iranian people have with European countries goes back decades, right now in the middle of the conflict between the Islamic Republic and United States and Israel, this frustration and this anger has peaked to much higher levels. From the perspective of Iranians, the European countries have always been on their wrong side of their struggle and their fight against the Islamic Republic. They also consider European countries, especially France and the UK, responsible for the Islamic Republic being in power right now. But over the years, they always saw that it was the European countries that constantly provided ways for the Islamic Republic to survive. They were always the latest to condemn them. They were always the first to appease and negotiate with them and legitimize them and recognize them. But right now, in the most important fight of the Iranian people against the regime, against their oppressors, it is the European countries that are constantly trying to get in the way between United States and Israel when it comes to their fight against the Islamic Republic. And it's the European countries that seem to constantly be trying to stop the Americans and stop the Israelis and find ways to save the Islamic Republic one more time. And many of these European countries, again, not all, but many of these European countries are always their condemnation of the Islamic Republic's treatment of the Iranian people is just surface level, and it's just mostly words and symbolic actions, and most of the time is much less than what the Iranian people expect. It's embarrassing that even after the greatest massacre in modern history upon a people, the European countries still have a relationship with the Islamic Republic. They still haven't shut down the embassies or kicked out the ambassadors of the Islamic Republic. I think history is not going to look at what these European countries were doing with a lot of shame and disgust. It's interesting that it's the European countries who constantly try to sell the idea that they are the ones who are advocates of human rights globally. And usually European countries are seen as the greatest champions of human rights. And on the other side, it is United States and Israel that are constantly seen as the violators of human rights globally. And yet we see that it was United States and Israel that came to the aid of the Iranian people at their darkest time, at the moment that they needed help. It was these two countries that came to the aid of the Iranian people against their oppressors. And it was many of these European countries who pretend to be on the side of human rights who continued the strategy of appeasement with the oppressors of the Iranian people. And this is exactly why, justifiably, the Iranian people are so frustrated and angry with these European countries. From the perspective of many of these European countries, the calculation involves a cost-benefit analysis, mostly between energy security and the soft power of claiming that you're champions of human rights. It's important to understand that when certain countries come out and advocate for human rights or claim to be fighting for human rights, this is not separate from other tactics when it comes to gaining political power. Human rights advocacy is a weapon in diplomacy. It's not necessarily a genuine care for human rights. It's part of these European countries' soft power to brand themselves as advocates for human rights. And condemning Israel is one of the best ways to virtue signal that you are an advocate for human rights. Given the level of Jew hatred that exists around the world, you can safely use Israel as a scapegoat and condemn them and win some points with your both Islamic and leftist progressive audience without doing much for human rights. The condemnation itself and taking positions against Israel is the cheapest way to sell the idea that you are fighting for human rights. But again, it's an investment to gain leverage, to gain more soft power, to have more political capital to be able to spend it whenever you need it. So the cost-benefit analysis for many European powers is that angering the Islamic Republic and turning them into an enemy loses them access to an important part of the energy market. They have to calculate if there is going to be a significant loss in their soft power to be worth losing that access to that energy market. And their calculation is that maybe some symbolic statements or some limited action against the Islamic Republic will help them maintain the appearance that they are still on the side of human rights, but not aggressive enough for them to turn the Islamic Republic into an enemy and for them to lose access to their energy. Remember, there's no Jews involved in the oppression of the Iranian people. The lack of meaningful action against the Islamic Republic from their perspective is not going to make them lose that much credibility, at least among the audience that they care about. If these was Palestinians, on the other hand, and the so-called oppressors were Israelis, and again, the Israelis are not oppressors. The Israelis have never started a war. They're always responding to somebody else attacking them. But from their perspective, if these were Palestinians and the so-called oppressors were Israelis, then the calculation would be different, because among the audience that they care about, mostly progressive leftists and Islamic and the Muslim population, especially right now in Europe, in many countries like the UK and France, these are important voting blocs and you need to keep them happy. So virtue signaling by supporting the Palestinian cause and taking actions against Israel, especially, for example, in countries like Spain, that gains you more political capital than any meaningful actions against the Islamic Republic. And that's the main reason why the European countries fail to fight against the greatest human rights violations of our lifetime. Another part of their calculation is that either the Islamic Republic will eventually fall and there will be regime change, or they will be able to survive this. If the Islamic Republic survives this, then it doesn't make sense to turn them into an enemy and lose access to their markets. But even if they fall and eventually we have a secular democratic government inside Iran and Iran turns into a normal country, well, normal countries wouldn't be holding grudges. And their understanding is that, well, as a normal country, they're not going to be holding grudges against the European countries to close their energy, to close their oil and gas markets to the European countries, because the European countries weren't supporting the Iranian people as much as they should have. Their calculation is that the European market is a big market, and if the Islamic Republic is not in power and we have a normal government in Iran, their priorities will be to maximize the prosperity of the Iranian people. So they're not just going to abandon the European market as a customer for such a reason. They would think that either way, it doesn't make any sense to turn the Islamic Republic into an enemy, because if the Islamic Republic survives, turning them to an enemy will cost the Europeans. And if the Islamic Republic doesn't survive, the lack of action is not going to make the next government shut off their oil and gas to Europe. If that is the calculation, what is the way for us to increase the cost to European countries for their lack of action exactly in this moment of time where the Iranian people need the most support? Given that we cannot change their calculation on the energy side, we have to do maximum damage to them on the soft power side. The narrative that the European countries stand for human rights and Israel and United States violate human rights, that needs to be challenged. The European countries who haven't been taking actions to support the Iranian people need to be exposed and called out as countries who allowed a massacre to happen, as countries that will be remembered with shame in history, as countries who just stood by and watched the greatest massacre on a civilization happen in their time without them doing anything meaningful about it. And also, the celebration of United States and Israel as the only two countries that stepped up to fight this evil needs to increase as well. We have to completely flip that narrative. And more of us need to celebrate United States and Israel as defenders of human rights and condemn Europeans' lack of action and expose them and take this idea that they stand for human rights away from them. Come talk to me about this and other topics in our discussion group. The link is in the description or in the bio. If you think this was interesting or educational, let me know. I read the comments, and the comments that tell me that this was useful really motivates me to make more videos like this. My name is Armin Navavi. I'm Israel Chai. Long live America. Javid Shah. Payandeira.